Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare.
Okay, welcome everyone. Such a joy to have you all. A gift to be here on this snowy Wednesday night, first week of the new year, year of the water tiger. So, Roxanne, I believe you had a question.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay. So when the teachings say to pray to someone or to pray at all, or like grant your blessings so that my mind may be one with the Dharma, that kind of thing, to whom are we praying?
Well, the question is, who are you praying to at that moment? So,
Yeah.
Right? So you could be praying to the Buddha, the whole enlightened merit field of awakened beings. So I'm asking you, who would you be praying to? So we have a whole litany of bodhisattvas and Buddhas and awakened beings that have devoted their life to helping us and helping others. And so when you are, like we just took refuge, right? Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And so we're taking refuge there. And then we're motivating ourselves with the bodhisattva motivation. In the Chenrei Sig practice, we are requesting sometimes all of the beings, sometimes Chenrei Sig. So you being clear about who you're directing your prayer to. Different practices, different prayers would be directed at different beings. Is that helpful?
That is helpful. That's kind of what I was thinking myself, but I just wanted to see if there was something I didn't know.
No, you know everything. Yeah, and so some confusion around that for a lot of people, and this is where people are thinking, well, grant me these blessings, and then Buddhism says, well, you kind of have to do your own work, right? So it's like, wait a minute, why am I asking this? If please purify and cleanse my this karmic imprints, as though some other being's going to do that for you, which is not what's going to happen. And so I think that's where sometimes there's confusion. I remember once I was giving a talk on the 5 powers at a different Dharma center out in San Diego, and it was multi-denominational. So this one guy was like, "Who the hell are you praying to? This is Buddhism. We don't have no God." It's like, okay, so let's go back over what we're talking about with what prayer is and an aspiration and so forth. And so if, for example, anything that we acquire in our life, any compassion, any wisdom, cup of water, did I acquire this water? No. Did I have a part in acquiring this water? Yes. Were there countless others that helped provide this water? Yes. Likewise, to become awakened, can I draw upon the inspiration, the teachings, the guidance, even manifestations of awakened beings to help me in that process? Yes, I'm engaged in a process with them. So I need to do my work to purify. I need to engage in purification practice. I need to cultivate compassion. I need to cultivate wisdom, which is going to cut through the root of that. But I can't do any of that without you, without others, without access to shelter, food, clothing, and I can engage with wonderful teachers and incredible guidance that will collectively cultivate this path together. And so I'm inviting them to help me in this process and engage with them. And so there's always an interdependent experience that we're having, always dependently arising experience. And so they can be incredibly helpful. And so as we pray, as we engage, as we gather our aspirations, our desires, our motivation, we're really infusing those aspects within our own hearts and minds, and ultimately recognizing our own Buddha nature, which is already there. But we need some help uncovering that. So therein lies this opportunity when we think about prayer and help and support and something we can lean into, is to know that they're always there, always available, always accessible. But we need to learn a bit about how to access them and clear away some of the obscurations that are preventing us from even knowing, that the Buddha's here for you at all times, and Tara's here for you at all times. There's a lot of obscuration in that way that we can't even recognize. The teachings say you could be, talking to a Buddha and have no idea that you're talking to a Buddha right now. And it could look like some knucklehead, with a "I love Trump" hat, and you wouldn't even know it's Buddha. That's how obscure, we could be. So this opportunity to clear away those obscurations, to clear away that confusion, is opportunities to recognize that support that's always available, always here. So when we're praying, to have these removed, we're really inviting to be a part of that process, to invite them in as well. And just by cultivating those qualities within ourselves, they ripen more within ourselves. All right. Any other questions there?
Yeah, John, at the end of the chapter that we were working on last week, there's a whole section on consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about that, I think, but not much. Are we going to discuss some of that tonight as well? Are we going to move on to the next chapter?
Yeah, we're going to move on, because I think the essence, unless there is some confusion, I'm always happy to clarify. But the main point was the main point of that section around consciousness is understanding that we have sort of this conventional consciousness that we think and use and see and experience the world, but we have a deeper consciousness and awareness that contains those potentials that we're talking about, the potentials of anger, the potentials of wisdom, the potentials of patience, the potentials of frustration, and this consciousness that is baseline, which is still not a fully awakened consciousness, just a consciousness that perceives me as human, in a human form, and things I like and things I don't like, and that the imprints within that consciousness are the potentials. And what he was stating there, and we don't go too far because we're going to get more into causes and liberation, but to understand that our mental and emotional states, experiences, are going to arise as potentials, and that our main confusion is we think that the cause is outside of that mental consciousness, when in fact the material cause is within, the potential is within. And so that was the big distinction that he was making there around consciousness. So we have ear consciousness, nose consciousness, eye consciousness, and we have these receptors of consciousness. We have a conventional consciousness of all this. But you said there's a more subtle consciousness and awareness that is observing all of this. And even deeper within that is this baseline consciousness, that of becoming, that continues, that is aware. And within that is all these imprints. They call them bakchaks. These imprints, karmic imprints. We're going to talk a little bit about those kleshas and karma. That's where we are tonight, actually. These are the imprints within that consciousness of what we call klesha and karma. These bakchaks, these little karmic imprints that are within us. And so he was just distinguishing the difference between those outer conditions, which are contributing, which are, in a sense, contributing causes. But the real ultimate causes of anger, frustration, mental, emotional suffering, and so forth, is an internal one. And that those imprints, those potentials are within the consciousness, not out there. And so that's where he was really making the point. And then he's going to lead right into where we're going tonight, which is klesha. I don't think we'll get too much into karma. Klesha will be probably good enough. And kleshas are mental afflictions. So that which takes us out of our presence and clarity of mind. But yeah, as I say, if there's ever any confusion on those points, I'm happy to explore those. Okay, so where we are tonight, I'll pop up on the screen. Now that we're starting to have people come here, we're going to have some screen here because the PowerPoint thing won't work that well. So in the text, we're at the truth of the origin of suffering. And just the recap is a little bit about what I just shared, is the fundamental problem, this fundamental problem is that we want happiness and we do things that create suffering, right? And the fundamental issue is that how we're experiencing life is though my happiness is out there or my suffering's out there. And so that's what he was teasing out in that whole first section. And then he's making a point that at the core of all this, right, at the core of all this is ignorance, misperception. I just don't like the word ignorance that much. It sounds so harsh, doesn't it? Ignorant, very ignorant. Misperception, misunderstanding. But, technically in these texts, it'll be ignorance a lot. And he's saying right here that there's two forms, right? Two types of ignorance. So this is avidya, which is ignorance of the laws of causality, specifically the laws of karma and ignorance. And the other one is ignorance of ultimate nature of reality. So two kinds of ignorance. One is we don't really understand the laws of cause and effect, really sources of happiness, sources of suffering, how that works. And the other is an ignorance of our ultimate nature, the nature of reality, our own good in nature. We identify me and mine with that, which is not me and mine. It seems very hard. I'm over here, you're over there. You have your stuff, I've got my cup. Don't be messing with my cup. Mine, yours, and that big problem. And so we don't really recognize or understand. We can even sometimes get a pretty good intellectual understanding of interdependence. We can kind of get, like I mentioned, the water. And one of my favorite examples, as you may have heard a few times, is food, right? Food. I like food. It's hard to find a food I don't like, for example. There's a couple though, right? I'm not a big pumpkin pie fan. But it's not terrible. It's just, not. Grapefruit, that's the one. Yeah, so grapefruit, not so much. Pretty much everything else is on the table. So, but anyway, food. So food, I have food. I start chewing food. At some point, food stops becoming food, right? And at some point, it becomes me. Right, so where does that happen? At some point, it's food. At some point, it's me. And then at some point, some of it leaves my body, and it's not food, and it's not me. It's not so interesting anymore either. And but those nutrients go on and fertilize and grow. And so if I start to understand, I like that because it's just so tangible, right? Food, me, not me, in a cycle. And so everything in my life is interdependent. I'm interdependent with all of this experience. I'm only arising in dependence upon where he's going here in the whole point of causes and conditions. And so I don't really see the world that way very often, right? And it's not our experience naturally. So that's one form of ignorance. We think me and mine, you and yours. Things are objective, separate, independent when nothing's independent. And the other one is we just don't understand that sort of cause and effect, that relationship very well. So those are the two forms. And at the core of this is if we eliminate the ignorance, we eliminate all the other problems, we eliminate samsara, we eliminate this whole cycle of suffering for ourselves. So that's root. And so for those of you here, I've highlighted a few spots in the text and they can see it online. The first level was an understanding in terms of causal dependence, which dispels our ignorance of the laws of causality. So the first level of wisdom. So the first level of wisdom we get is sort of understanding this cause and effect. We can start to understand that. We can interact with it better. We can get a more realistic, accurate understanding of causes of well-being and causes of suffering. And then the more profound level is the wisdom in terms of the ultimate nature of reality, which dispels our fundamental ignorance. So these two types of ignorance and two levels of wisdom. One's sort of interactive with the causal, and one is the knowing, the direct knowing of reality itself and your own nature. So that's where he's leading into is, okay, we're true causes of suffering, at the core, misunderstanding, misperception. And there's wisdom that we can cultivate, but they're in these two areas. And then he goes on to say, this does not mean ignorance is the only cause of unenlightened existence. Right? It's primary, but not the only. There's many other derivative causes and conditions, which are technically called kleshas. I just call them afflictions. He uses the word afflictive emotions and thoughts. Okay, so kleshas, these are going to be these afflictions, mental and emotional afflictions. For example, and then he says, here's where it gets adventurous. Well, you started with ignorance. Now he's going to add on. According to Dharma, there's 6 root afflictive emotions or thoughts, out of which arise 20 secondary types of emotions and thoughts. And then that goes on to more, and then they come up with a number of 84,000. So spirals. That's a lot. I don't have the whole list of 84,000, but I did pull up a list of the 6 and the 20, and I'm not going to go through all the 20, but I do want to share with people, these core root 6, and also give a vision of how then they lead to this spiral of the 20 and then more. And it's nice, it's not that we need to memorize 20 or memorize all of these. If we memorize and understand the core, often we talk about 3 root poisons, and which grows to 6, 20, you can see how that just spirals, and then you can unravel it, and it can really help. So I will pop that up for those of you online. So our 3 roots, and what's really nice for me personally, what I really appreciate about these core root 3 is I can know right away whether I'm creating samsara or awakening just by what I'm doing. If I'm coming from a place of ignorance, of misunderstanding, of anger or attachment, I'm creating samsara. So that's 3 root. Those are the 3 root. If I'm coming from a place of renunciation, loving kindness, or compassion, awakening. So they're the opposites. And so it's nice, go right there. Okay, we don't have to go through this whole thing. And so the more that we can be mindful and aware of what our motivation is, the more we're going to find out whether I am cultivating a prison or a path of awakening, the key or the lock. So ignorance is, again, those 2 forms. Anger, is related to hatred. Sometimes they talk about, hatred, it's said, so anger. And then attachment, sometimes also called greed, attachment. So those are the 3 root. Those are at the root of the wheel, and which leads to these spokes. The other 3 that come right there: pride, doubt, and wrong view. Pride, doubt, and wrong view. And it's interesting because we have all these bumper stickers. I'm proud of my honor student. And so we want to really be clear about this kind of pride. This kind of pride says I'm better than somebody, right? And that is going to be a problem. Pride in relation to I'm better than somebody. Well, that's a whole prison itself. And then it's going to create, you'll see in these next 20, insecurity. Pride's going to create a lot of insecurity. What, you don't treat me? Don't you see my certificate on the wall? Don't you know I'm a PhD? Don't you know I'm this? Don't you know I'm trained? Or someone might even actually say something to you that is just so obvious. And you think, what, am I an idiot? You think I'm an idiot? Laura will, pretty much tell me how to drive on occasion. And, like, hey, you wear that or this there. And pride could be, what, you don't think I see that, right? Instead of, how wonderful she's helping us be safe, right? How wonderful she's keeping an eye out, because I don't always see everything, right? But see, that's where pride gets really sticky, and in a way that's not very healthy. So this opportunity then is to recognize that what we're talking about here isn't, it's good to have self-worth, right? And it's good to have a joy and a pride in your friends and family, and they do well. So that joyful kind of recognition of the value of someone is just quite good. It's, my kid's better than that other kid, right? We got a whole marketing plan on that, actually, right? Best grandpa ever, best parent ever, best, and just this whole thing, and we don't even see how that really creates some real issues. So that's right up there. Doubt. Now, this kind of doubt is this sort of wishy-washiness. It's not to be confused with investigating and clarifying and challenging thoughts and ideas or teachings. That's how you get clarity and wisdom. So the doubt is where you never actually do that. You kind of go, well, that might be true. That might be all right. I'm going to read this spiritual book. I'm going to read that. That's good. I'll take this piece. I like that. Don't really like that. And this sort of never really fully going into something. And so this kind of a doubt becomes a real problem and leads us astray in many ways, because we can't come out of prison. And so the doubt here is not a doubt in Buddhism. It could be a doubt in whatever spiritual path you're on, in whatever spiritual tradition you're in, or whatever spiritual journey you're on your path. It's like the difference being that a lot of people never get on a path. We circle a lot. We read this and we read that, and we talk about this and we talk about that. And this might be true, and I'd like to explore that and this. But we never actually dig in, check it out. Is it right for me or not? And the only way to get anywhere is to be on a path. Otherwise, I don't get anywhere. So there's many paths. And this kind of a doubt, this wishy-washiness is just it's gonna be a sort of it's kind of like stagnant water, right? It's not running, it's not moving, it's not clearing. And so the difference between a doubt and questioning, question is seeking answers. And we encourage that. The only way to get clarity is to challenge, to test, to debate, to check it out, to analyze what's true and what's true for you. But if we don't take the step into and lean into that, if we don't have a foundation of some faith, and a faith that comes from actual exploration, not, it sounded good, we're just going to be stuck. So that's going to be a core. And then the wrong view here, it's not simply ignorance in a sense. It's the wrong view here is really attaching to a view that is not accurate and not being open to change. So it's really grabbing onto, the causes of this or that, and in a way that is not how they work. But you're firm in it, and you're not willing to question it. You're not willing to explore it. People sort of what's the analogy is the biggest impediment to learning is the presumption of knowledge, right? I know this is how it is. So I can't learn, I can't question. And I'm going to tell you, me right here, 20 years later, my understanding of my path of Buddhism is much different than it was 20 years ago. And that's through constant exploration. And if we're not open to do that, we're not going to get very far. And also, if the wrong views are actually building a prison of samsara, there's going to be some challenge there, right? I'm hanging on to this is the way it is, instead of well, let's make sure, let's engage in a conversation about that. Let's explore this. Really important to keep that open, discerning mind. So these 6 are what they call the 6 root afflictions, which gives rise to, and they say 20 sort of secondary. And for those of you online, I'll just pop it up just so you can see a list. And that way, when this is recorded, if somebody wanted to look at it, you'll have the list here. But there's some interesting ones on here, and I just want to talk about one that pops up. So rage, resentment, spitefulness, cruelty, envy. The one that I was thinking about was concealment. And I think that one is very pernicious. So out of those 6, right, so you can see where anger and rage are going to come in, and pride and resentment is going to come in. You're going to see some real relationships when you look at this list to those 6. But they're all coming from the misperception. But this concealment, that is where I'm unwilling to share or expose my faults. I'm concealing my faults, my weaknesses. I'm engaged in behavior that I need to hide. And that's a prison. That is a prison in and of itself. All of my years in treatment and recovery, what I have found the most damaging for people is that you're never going to find your value if you have something to hide. The thing, I'm a bad person, shame, all of that. And there's an incredible liberation to clearing that, to not having something to hide. There's a whole process in our Western psychology and so forth around bringing that old stuff up. So I have nothing to hide. I share it. In the recovery circles, you tell every single secret you have just to another human being. You say it out loud. You write it down, you get it clear. And that is an incredible freedom. So this concealment, which I noticed here, it's just something to really be aware of when we notice that maybe, I have something to hide. And it's subtle too. I mean, one of the funny ways that shows up for me sometimes, I've made a point not to do this anymore, is when someone would call me, and something, and, like I was asleep. Did I wake you up? And I'd say, no. Well, hell yeah, you woke me up, and like, why wouldn't I share that? What am I hiding? Or, or you make a little mistake, and it's like, so these little sneaky, subtle things, they're not much, they're not a big deal. You didn't create some big crime, but why can't I just share that I forgot something, or I missed something, or, I slept in, or, concealment is an incredible prison. So any opportunity you have just to nip that one in the bud, I'm just going to encourage that. One of my big sort of journeys in life personally is to just not have anything to hide. Just not have anything to hide. If you found out anything about me, I would be okay. I mean, there's an incredible freedom in that journey. And in that way, you'll discover you're not less than anyone, you're not better than anyone. You're okay. And it's messy for all of us. We all do ridiculously insane, stupid things sometimes. Yeah, I'm a master at that. But also those are the opportunities to grow. And I think our journey here, which I've just been harping on for the last 6 months or so, is, when I do fall down, when I do things that are, didn't turn out so well, or stupid, or whatever they were, I see that as a success, that I learned what does not work. I successfully learned how not to be happy, because that's how I learned to be happy. But if I'm not attending to it, then I'm not going to learn how to be happy. So a real freedom there. And so, these 20 that pop up, goes ignorance, then, add that the 3, then the 6, then the 20, and then this myriad. And these are all afflictive states. So, and the definition, I do have it highlighted here, is, so I'll wait for that, but it's about taking us out of our peace, taking us out of our just peace of being. I notice we do have a hand up, so I'm going to take the slide down, and Rita.
Thanks. I was wondering if you could touch on the difference between laziness and lethargy.
Yeah, well, lethargy is kind of being tired, in a sense, of sort of lethargy of tired. Laziness, so there's these 3 forms of laziness that are taught within Buddhism, and one of them is busyness. So a form of laziness is busyness, and meaning I'm busy doing all the things that are not as important as, the path of awakening, the things to attend to. And that's really an interesting, tricky laziness. We'll always have all these other things to do before I actually, do the things that are meaningful, important, and cultivate presence, mental, emotional health, well-being. And so the other common form of laziness is the procrastination, right? I'm going to do it later, that kind of laziness. And I'm not pulling up the third one. Anybody? Self-deprecation. What? Self-deprecation. Self-deprecation, kind of that. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Yeah, that form of thank you. It's good to have a crowd here. Might have been, well, some of you online would help. So the third one would be that, yeah, I'm not good enough, kind of laziness to do it. So those would be the Buddhist types of laziness. So lethargy is more of a real tiredness of the mind, unclarity of the mind and body. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so all those type A personalities are lazy. Really lazy people. So, but yeah, I think you'll catch yourself when you think about, all those things that we think are important and are meaningful that we don't do because we're doing something else. All right, so that's the way this works, is that within, out of misperception, misunderstanding, where my happiness, where my suffering is. I like this, I don't like that. I'm going to start engaging in activities that, give me what I want, and other people are going to be in my way, and then they're going to be idiots, and I'm going to be the right person, and I'm going to build the resentments and envy and then pride, and these things are all going to come into play, and those potentials grow within my mind stream. And then when people act like this or act like that, or they wear those kinds of clothes or they do that kind of activity, those things arise in my mind. And so these kleshas. So the foundation of samsara is our kleshas, our mental afflictions, combined with our karmic imprints, these bhakchaks. Let me pull up next portion of this. So these afflictive emotions and thoughts, which arise from our fundamental delusion, right, giving rise to volitional actions, so intentional actions. Together, delusions and karmic actions are the origins of our suffering, of samsara. So I guess I said that a little before you did. So generally speaking, again, here's his definition here. Afflictive emotions and thoughts are defined as those of which the mere occurrence of them creates immediate disturbance within our mind. They then afflict us from within. So all this is to go to the point of these are within, not without. We keep going out there and it's within. Which is really going to get to a real key point here is is mind foundational or body, right? And so even going more deeply in this is that my body's arising in dependence upon that consciousness, those karmas, those kleshas. And what's really incredible about that is, there's opportunities to heal the physical by working on these karma and kleshas and how we experience ourselves. Which is in that path then of 3 and 4. Right, we're right up at the hour, and so we just are wrapping up the klesha part. It's going to get in the karma. I did want to just tap into the karma for a moment. Once you tap into karma, it gets. I'm so tempted. I'm going to resist. Okay. I'm not going to resist. I'm going to give you something to think about. Then we'll unpack more next week. Got to get our toe in the water here. And because, he says some things that are pretty, spot on in a way that I hadn't actually thought about. So karma is one particular instance of the natural causal laws that operate throughout the universe, where, according to Buddhism, things and events come into being purely as a result of a combination of causes and conditions, right? So how this whole thing is held together, how we experience everything is held together by karma, right? And causes and conditions. So that's why we've spent all that time on differentiating between causes and material causes and conditions. And then this is the makings of samsara. Karma then is an instance of the general law of causality. And what makes karma unique is that it requires, now I'm putting my own words in there. What makes karma unique is that it involves intentional action, therefore an agent. there needs to be an agent. There needs to be some being, some conscious thing that's intentionally doing something that creates karma, which is different from what's out there that's not karma. There's a whole phenomenon of experience that gets experienced in very different ways. And the one that we're experiencing is going to be due to a lot of, you just found out we're all agents. Some of us are secret agents. I'd like to be a special agent. You know, you ever see that on a cop show or something? Special agent. So he's going to make this important point that there is all this that happens and things in our experience and nature and the world, the universe, and all that. But when we're talking about karma, it's going to be the world experience through all these agents. And then he's going to go into sort of the those core types of karma. And the point I wanted to tap into before we left is, again, the motivation. So for any complete karma to be created, and very rare to have a complete karma, very rare, there needs to be the motivation, the action, how we feel about it, so everything. But the greatest weight of an activity is our motivation. And so again, if I can catch myself at the motivation point, is it loving kindness, compassion, or is it anger, attachment? Am I in concealment, or am I in truthfulness? Am I in pride, or am I in equanimity? Do I think I'm better than someone, or do I recognize I'm more fortunate than some? You know, that's a very different way of understanding things. And so the more I can be mindful of my motivation, that's going to transform the imprints, the karma. It's the combination of this karma and klesha that gives our experience. And so our big first line of freedom is being more aware of my motivation again and again and again. And the core of mindfulness then is to guard my mind against non-virtue. It's to guard my mind against the poison that imprison me, and to redirect to that which liberates. And so in this next section here on karma, we're going to talk about the types of karma and how they unfold. But it's the combination of klesha and karma that is ultimately our samsara. So as we eliminate our mental afflictions and as we purify our karma, well, this whole experience becomes a whole different thing. Nirvana and samsara is no other place. I don't go anywhere. I just start seeing more clearly. All right, so pause right there. I didn't get in there, right? Good summary. Okay. So, question time, discussion, anything coming up? Yeah, a little time for that.
I'm wondering what's meant by complete karma, but maybe you don't want to touch on that just yet.
Well, that's an easy one to go through in a real simple form. So a complete karma of, let's say, anger. I'm angry. I'm motivated to hurt someone. I hurt someone. The action, the motivation is there. The action is there. I follow through with the action. I do hurt someone. And then at the end of it, I feel really good about it. You know, really got them. I hurt them. Awesome. So that would be a complete motivation, action, follow through, completion, and then maintaining that mind even at the end. Okay, so that's pretty rare generally. Sometimes you might get angry, but you don't really do much about it. Sometimes you get angry and you do, hurt someone in some way. Sometimes you feel bad about it, and so most of the karma we do is some mixture of wholesome and unwholesome, right? I might have some pretty angry thoughts about someone, but I don't say anything. Or I may say something and then feel bad about it. We generally have a lot of mixture in there.
That was easy.
Yeah. Yeah, so complete would be all the way through. And we generally have a mixture in there. Didn't intend to hurt someone, may hurt someone. All right, not a lot of curiosity there. We nailed this. We got.
I have a question.
Okay.
What if you have the intender of the action, and between kind of the intention of the action, the execution of the action, can there be like a break before the kind of karma is completed if the intender is seen to not be solid? Like an inherently existing intender that at a previous time did this act, meant to do it, felt good about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of how the Vajrasattva purification kind of works? Is looking back at the original intender of the kind of, if you could call it, the start of the karma?
Mm-hmm. Let me try to get clarity on exactly what you're saying. So a past action where
Yes.
that was complete.
Yes.
And now, currently,
Yep.
someone is bringing that back to mind.
Right.
And then now having some regret. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I think that's where the split comes, is that difference between the regret and also doing the purification practice for the sense of not associating with guilt,
I see.
I guess that's that difference, because seeing it kind of from the higher, more recognized view,
Mhm.
recognizing the intender and the intended, it seems like you can maybe say, yes, who regrets that, I guess, who is the regretter?
Right.
Is it the original intender, or is it kind of a current new point in time?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. So as we, maybe in our current state, we might have a different and a greater degree of understanding about emptiness, selflessness. And so as I'm doing a purification practice, I'm recognizing that person, that did this event doesn't actually exist anywhere except in my own mind and consciousness.
Right.
And so bringing that view, that understanding that person no longer exists, the regret that's arising. The way I view that personally is when I think about intelligent regret, when I apply intelligent regret, I apply it in the sense of cultivating wisdom. That I'm not looking at the event as though I'm a bad person or was a bad person or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm approaching it as, what did I learn?
Mm-hmm.
How did that activity cultivate a prison? How does wisdom arise from that event? And so in the purification process, really identifying intelligent regret as a wisdom arising from viewing that event with us an understanding of interdependence, of samsara, of klesha, and now having a new wisdom arising from it, and a clarity around those types of activities are not anything I want to engage in.
Right.
As opposed to I did a bad thing or that. It's those events have given rise to this wisdom now that I now have about how to participate in life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the view.
Yeah, that's helpful. So kind of moving using it as kind of a step up, as a wisdom. It's almost like you looked at somebody else make this mistake and you've seen the pain of that. And it's like this little workaround, almost like a little workaround, but like, oh, I know someone that did that and it didn't work out well for them.
Yeah, I don't think I'd go someone else though.
No.
Just because since we do have a continuum of consciousness,
Right.
and that imprint is in there,
Yeah.
I recognize that an aspect of my consciousness at a point in time did that, because I'm purifying that stream of consciousness. So, but I'm not identified with the being as though that's me.
But it's not separate then.
Right, and is it still within that stream of consciousness, and those chocks and imprints are in that stream. So, and we're purifying that stream of awareness, not the human John.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. That was a good question. That's a big key when we're doing purification, and is not, we don't want shame. We want wisdom. We want to recognize and go deeply and openly into what that experience was, what it felt like, and understand the harm, and see the prison that it builds and the wisdom arising of understanding about how not to participate in life. Got another minute, anybody else?
Okay, I've got a quick one. Last week, I think it was maybe the week before, we talked about causes and conditions.
Yeah.
And in the section on the condition of impermanence,
Mm-hmm.
His Holiness says, because there is fundamental ignorance, volitional acts come into being. So the ignorance is the ignorance of what we've just discussed tonight, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And, he was making that point earlier. Yeah. Around sort of that foundational issue. But now where he's clarifying it, right? Before he was just making a more general ignorance of that we misperceive the sources of happiness and misperceive the sources of suffering. And we keep seeking happiness, and in the process, we're actually cultivating suffering. So he was making that more general. Now he's getting specific around the ignorance of not understanding causality and not sort of the dependently arising, nature of reality, our experience of who we are. And out of that, so that's core, and then volitional actions, those intentional actions, and then, attachment, anger, aversion, pride, and all that springs.
And those are driven by our karmic imprints?
Karmic imprints are very interrelated with them, yes. Bak chocks, these, and we're going to unpack those a little bit more. So karmic imprints are going to have a lot to do with how we experience the phenomena that we're experiencing. And the mental afflictions are going to be with how we relate to that experience. And so, we get these things into our senses, and our karma is going to, see things, see a guy here, Aaron, who just had a birthday. Happy birthday. Aaron had a birthday. Everybody say, yeah. And so there's going to be this intake and experience, and then how I relate to, well, I like Aaron, and that's a good thing. I have a birthday, and then now I'm going to have this experience, and so there's going to be this relationship between the karma, the events and the experiences, and then the attachment or non-attachment to them is going to be around the afflictive states that will arise out of that. So they're going to be very intertwined. I'm not going to say this. No. However, I will say that if we remember that how we're experiencing, everything is subjective, that's going to be huge. So, our karmic imprints are going to have a huge, that's how we're experiencing things that appear beautiful or not so beautiful, or tasty or not so tasty, and this or that. And as we change karma, things that used to not be very tasty can become tasty. That's how the karma is working. So it's going to have a direct impact on how I'm experiencing this life that I'm experiencing. And then the kleshas are going to be around the attachments to things and the aversions and then the resentments and all that. But how I'm taking it. So as I change my karma, I change how I'm experiencing my body. I change how I'm experiencing I change how I'm experiencing things. And then I can work with the mental and emotional habits by how I relate to those experiences. And then the unfolding of which is the interrelationship is around, out of my mental states, I'm going to engage in actions which can create negative karmic imprints or positive karmic imprints. And that's where the volitional, the intentional points come in, that motivation. So they're very tied together. And the beautiful thing is, if we start recognizing we're creating our future right now, well, that's pretty cool. I just wear a shirt, don't be a jerk. Helps, a little reminder. And, be kinder, catch your motivation. And so core to everything that's going to always be here is mindfulness. If I'm not aware of my motivation, I'm not aware of what I'm doing, then habit and then the autopilot of karma and klesha just rolls. And so the freedom to choose to act consciously and cultivate a path of awakening, opening a prison instead of building one. We're going to have more choice if we're present to make the choice. And I'm going to be more aware of how things actually work. And then once I know the game plan as a direction book, well, okay, I can start cultivating the causes for well-being, inner peace, and more joy. So it's kind of nice. We got a book. Finally got the instruction manual I've been looking for my whole life. Okay, Rita, you got a question.
So how much weight do our thoughts carry in terms of karma? Like, if we think we think ill of someone, but we don't act on it, we don't, and then we say in our head something awful about the driver on the road, and then we back out of that and say, but I have compassion because maybe they're in an emergency, or, we might think a bad thought about someone, and then, like, if we catch ourselves and then think a compassionate thought, do we get a little bit of a pass on karma? Or what's the weight of negative thoughts?
That's such a great question. And you know what I really have found fascinating about TV series? There's always a cliffhanger. So next week, we'll dig into that. And if you're really ultimately curious, if you start, just read this section, he's going to start teasing that out. But that's where we're going to dive into next week, is unpacking sort of karma and how it's weighted and these sort of types and, karma with a remainder and all that. So we'll get into that. Maybe we're a little past our time, but I think it's great to have a cliffhanger. Don't all of you? I mean, that's what makes you tune in next week. All right.
I want to know now.
Awesome. That makes it even better. All right. Thank you, Mark. That's great. So let us let's see, any announcements.
Where will you be next week?
Sounds like a setup.
I want to be a little more specific. There's 7 days in a week and there's 24 hours in a day.
Wednesday. Where will you be?
So are you asking whether I will physically be in the Dharma Center next Wednesday for the teaching?
Or will you be doing the Dharma talk from New York or somewhere?
I am traveling to New York, so I will record the teaching as I have been doing, probably in the morning. And so that's why we'll continue with the teaching just as we've been doing.
Okay.
All right. You're like a detective. You are a special agent. Special
We
agent.
we don't want any concealment.
Special agent Roxana on the job. Thank you. All right. This is great. Okay, so we'll just take a moment to dedicate the merit. So that is the other key point he made, was since the motivation, the action, and then how we feel about it at the end are so important, when we do virtuous actions like the Dharma teaching, we set our motivation, we set the highest motivation. We engaged in this action, and now we dedicate it. It just maximizes this virtue to an nth degree. And so that's why it's always, and that's a point he makes in the text, is why not really amp up the good stuff? And so as we have engaged now in this virtuous activity, as we've set our motivation at the beginning, now we dedicate all of this merit and wisdom for the benefit of all sentient beings, that they may be free and that we may create the conditions for our own awakening to be of ultimate benefit. And so that would be this beautiful, complete karma that we've cultivated on this path of awakening for countless others. So just taking a moment now to cultivate that dedication in our hearts and minds, that this time we've spent together benefits all sentient beings and ourselves on this journey of awakening. Let us dedicate. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, well, thank you all so much. Such a joy to have you all here, those physically here and those online. One exciting thing I didn't announce is, we do now, these go on a podcast. So got a bunch of podcasts up, and those are getting downloaded. So if you do miss anything, you can access the podcast and you can share it with others if you like. All right, meantime, let's watch our motivations. Let's see if we can really catch ourselves as much as possible. And for sure, in general, catching yourself and changing directions a whole lot better than just staying angry. Feels better too. All right. Well, be well. Have a good night. And thank you so much.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om